Hey Potter nerds, it is Kathleen and welcome back to my channel. Hope you're having a wonderful magical day. Welcome to my channel if you're new, welcome back if you're not. So I'm so happy to be back on my channel. I know that the book club video is a couple of days late. I went back to work on Monday and I'm so thankful for that. I really missed my tiny muggles and missed working, so I was happy about that, but made the decision that we should probably move the book club day to Saturday or Sunday. So it's Saturday night right now when I'm filming this, so I'll either post it right after I edit it or post it tomorrow. So whenever you're seeing this is when I post it, obviously. But I just wanted to make sure you had that update. I updated my TikTok following. I think I forgot to do Instagram, but I just wanted to let y'all know that's what's going on. I'm so excited to be here doing the 4th, 5th, and 6th chapters of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I actually read through the chapters twice. The second time wasn't like a full, detailed read. It was just me reviewing it, take notes. I think that was actually pretty beneficial because it just made sure that I remembered the chapters, and yeah, I'm really excited to get to that. And before we get into the book discussion, if you haven't already, click that subscribe button and add a little more Lumos to your day. And give this video a big thumbs up if you are enjoying this Living Lumos Book Club series. I am, so I hope you are as well. So I'm going to stop talking and let's get straight into the book discussion. So chapter 4, The Keeper of the Keys. So this chapter, in summary, is basically all about Harry finally learning about who he is and about what happened to his parents. So when we left off in the Letters from No One, chapter 3, it left off with someone knocking at the door at midnight on the on this hut on the rock in the middle of the sea, body of water, whatever. So the knocking grows louder until the door comes right off the hinges. Standing there is a giant man who introduces himself as Hagrid later on. Now, this brings like all of the Dursleys down to the living area, and they are terrified. Vernon tries to threaten the man with a rifle, but Hagrid yanks it away and ties it into a knot, which I thought was really funny. It's kind of similar in the movie, except he just kind of bends it up. And then Hagrid goes to the couch where Dudley's sitting frozen, and he tells him to get off, and Dudley runs away, terrified. And he says, and here's young Harry. So in the book, he doesn't mistake Dudley for Harry, because that's what he did in the movie. But Hagrid gives Harry a birthday cake and starts up the fire to make tea. Because it was like midnight at this time, and it had been a long journey trying to get to Harry. So he makes this, he makes tea, so he takes like a few sausages out of his coat, because as we know, Hagrid has his coat just full of treasures. He's like Mary Poppins, just with a coat. And he takes out a copper kettle, puts on some tea, makes some sausage, and Harry is eating, and he's never tasted anything better in his life because he is starving. Oh, before that, he actually in the book, they don't really specify how he starts a fire. He just leans forward and then back, and no one really sees how he does it. And during the tea, he's talking to Harry, and Harry's like, "Who are you?" And he's like, I'm trying not to use the word like so much. So he goes, "Who are you?" And Hagrid says, well, I'm Hagrid. I'm the keeper of keys at Hogwarts. But of course you know about Hogwarts, of course. And Harry says no, and then Hagrid, slowly talking to him, starts to realize Harry has no idea who he is. And Hagrid is angry that Harry knows nothing about who he is or who his parents are or where he comes from. So as he's trying to, reveal his information, Vernon would find his courage, insert himself in the conversation, and try to regain control and try and stop Hagrid from telling Harry anything. But of course it doesn't really work. And suddenly Hagrid finally says the famous line, "You're a wizard, Harry," or Harry or wizard in the book. And Harry's like, what? He said, and he's like, oh, you are a wizard, Harry, and a thumping good one at that. And he finally gets his Hogwarts letter. And what's interesting is it says, you know, dearest, actually what's really funny about the letter, let me pull up that page. It makes me laugh so much. Yeah, it's so funny. It's address, Mr. H. Potter, the floor, hut on the rock, the sea. I'm sorry, that made me giggle. And we get the letter and it says, Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl no later than July 31st. So July 31st, which happens to be Harry's birthday, is the last day that you can send your owl to let them know that you got your letter. So that's exactly why that, you know, they were desperate. This is the last like attempt to get for Harry to get his letter on the 31st. So speaking of which, Hagrid then sends word to Dumbledore via owl to let him know he gave Harry his letter. So Vernon once again tries to regain control of the situation and tell Hagrid Harry isn't going to Hogwarts, and that when they took him in, they intended to stamp it out of him, meaning stamping out the magic and wizard out of him, because to them, wizards were disgusting and anything but normal, and we know that Dursleys are perfectly normal, thank you very much. This is when Harry realizes that they knew all along, and he rightly expresses his anger. You know, you knew all along. And then Petunia, as if she's been holding this back her whole life, she says, knew? Of course we knew. And she goes on a rant about Lily, her perfect sister, and how she was the only one who saw her for what she was, a freak, and about her husband James. And then she goes, and then, if you please, she went and got herself blown up. And that's when Harry goes, blown up? You told me my parents died in a car crash. At this point, Hagrid almost completely loses it. Hagrid is a car crash for Lily and James Potter. It's an outrage. I might be quoting more of the movie here. I have like almost the whole movie memorized of the first movie. Anybody else like that? Hagrid quickly does calm down when he realizes he has to be the one who tells Harry what happened that fateful Halloween night in Godric's Hollow 10 years ago. At least what he knows. Like, he's looking at the Dursleys and said, you told him nothing about Dumbledore's letter? I'm like, yes. Maybe that's why Dumbledore should have stayed in person and not just left a letter with a baby on the front doorsteps. You know, a child abandonment here. Sorry. I'm just like, why didn't he just stay in person? That just seems like the stupidest decision ever. Anyway. So Hagrid has to be the one to explain to Harry who he is and where he comes from. So he explains who Voldemort, or he says, you know who. He can't say the name, but he tells Harry because he can't spell it, and he shudders because everybody's still afraid of saying that name. So you know who, he told him who Voldemort is, how he came to power. This is about 20 years ago, so 10 years before that fateful night on Halloween in Godric's Hollow 10 years ago. So this is like 10 years before that. And then how bad and dark those days were, saying you couldn't trust anybody, you don't know who was on whose side, and not to get friendly with strange witches and wizards. Like, it was just really weird. And how, like, after everything was over, it's like people came out of trances. It was really bad times, and Voldemort was just gathering followers. And he made a statement that Hogwarts was one of the only safe places left, and also insinuates because Dumbledore was the only one Voldemort feared, kind of like what McGonagall said in chapter 1. We find out James and Lily were on the good side, of course, and were head boy and head girl at Hogwarts. Hagrid's like, I'm surprised that Voldemort didn't try and recruit them to his side, but he probably didn't because he knew they were too close to Dumbledore to ever want to have anything to do with the dark arts. But so no one knows why he showed up in Godric's Hollow that night, but he killed James and Lily. Some people think that he was coming to recruit them or try and get them out of the way, but ultimately it ends up with him killing James and Lily. And he then tried to kill Harry, but he couldn't do it. For some reason, no one knows why. The scar is and he says, and that's why you never wonder where that scar came from on your forehead, because that scar is a mark of an evil curse touching Harry. That's how Hagrid explained the scar. And he tells Harry, you're famous because you are the only one who lived after Voldemort decided to kill someone. Because no one ever did that before. So he is famous for being the boy who lived. And then Harry's vision of a green flash of light became clearer, that we had read about before in the other chapters, in chapter 3 or 4 too. And for the first time, though, along with this vision, he also heard a cold, evil laughter. So once again, Vernon tries to insert himself and tries to regain control of the situation. And he's insinuating, you know, the world was better off without James and Lily because, you know, witches and wizards, blah, 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 blights on society, blah, blah, blah. Hagrid points his umbrella at Vernon and warns him to basically shut the heck up. And Harry asks what happened to you-know-who. Hagrid says he vanished, which is the other reason Harry is famous, because after that night in Godric's Hollow, he went away and no one knows where. There are some theories about what happened to him. Some say he died, which he thinks is Hagrid thinks is hogwash. Some say he's still out there laying in wait, which he doesn't believe either. But what a majority of people believe, and what Hagrid believes, is that he's still out there, powerless, too weak to carry on. So Harry, hearing all of this, still thinks that this must be some sort of weird mistake, which it kind of shows like how much he was mentally abused and literally abused by the Dursleys. He truly couldn't believe that he could be someone extraordinary with extraordinary powers, because if he'd had these powers, how come Dudley still wailed on him all the time? And how come Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia still treated him so badly and and put him in his cupboard? Why didn't they turn into frogs with warts? Or why did all these bad things happen? Why, if he was a wizard, why didn't that stop it from happening? Which, you know, that part kind of broke my heart reading. Then he's like, Hagrid, I can't be a wizard. And Hagrid says, ask him if he's ever made things happen when he was scared or angry, and things suddenly started to click and make sense to Harry. That incident when he ended up on the roof of his school, the incident with his hair growing back overnight after a horrible haircut, and most recently the vanishing glass in the reptile room at the zoo. So but Vernon one last time tries to regain control and says Harry is not going to Hogwarts. He then makes the mistake of insulting Dumbledore. You know, the old, I'm not paying some crackpot fool to teach him magic tricks. And that was a big mistake. Hagrid fully loses it and swings his umbrella towards Dudley, giving him a pigtail, which we see in the movie, which is a hilarious scene. Vernon then grabs Petunia and Dudley, and they run away and hide together in another room. Apparently, Hagrid was trying to turn Dudley into a whole pig, but my favorite part, he says he must have been like a pig enough, and that the tail was the only thing he needed. Hagrid asked Harry not to tell anyone he did that, because we learned that he's not supposed to do magic anymore since he got Harry his letter. And we also find out that Hagrid has expelled his third year at Hogwarts, but doesn't tell us why. They then go to sleep because they have a big day tomorrow in London to go get Harry's school supplies. Now here's the discussion question I have. I'm going to do only one question now per chapter. For the chapter 4 discussion question, what would you do if a giant told you that you were a witch or wizard? So how would you feel? Now let's move on to chapter 5. Chapter 5, Diagon Alley. So Diagon Alley, chapter 5, is all about both ours and Harry's first look into the magical world, while finding out more about Harry's fame. So following the events of around midnight of Harry's birthday, he wakes up later thinking it was all a dream, and that when he opens his eyes, he'll be back in his cupboard. He hears a tapping and he thinks that it's Aunt Petunia knocking on his cupboard door. But he opens his eyes and he sees the hut and Hagrid asleep on the sofa. The tapping was an owl with a newspaper in its beak outside the window. Harry was so happy it wasn't a dream. He opens the window and gets the paper and pays the owl after it starts ransacking Hagrid's coat and nips at Harry, and he gives him 5 nuts per the instructions of Hagrid as Hagrid wakes up. Hagrid then tells Harry to get ready to go so they can go to London and buy his school supplies. Then Harry has the sad realization that he has no money and knows the Dursleys won't pay for anything. But Hagrid reassures Harry by telling him his parents left him money at the Wizarding Bank Gringotts, which is run by goblins. And Harry's like, goblins? And he said, yeah, goblins. You definitely don't want to mess with goblins, and that's why you know everything's safe at Gringotts. Hagrid also needs to pick up something important for Dumbledore, which is he's very secretive about. So they then make the journey back to shore in the boat Vernon had used to get to the rock. Which makes me laugh, like just a side thought, is if they used the boat that Vernon brought and left it on the shore, what happened to the Dursleys? Do they like have to swim across, or was Hagrid nice enough to send it back? Like, I want to know what happened to the boat and how the Dursleys got back to Privet Drive after that. Just wondering. Hagrid had originally flew over the lake to get to the hut, but since he had already gotten Harry's letter to him, he couldn't use magic anymore, except before doing so, asking Harry not to tell anybody about it, he used a little magic to make the boat to go faster. On the boat ride, Harry learns more about Gringotts and the Ministry of Magic. Hagrid is reading a newspaper, or is reading the newspaper, the Daily Prophet, and Harry, from what he learned from the Dursleys, you never talk to an adult while they're reading the paper, but Hagrid was saying something about the Ministry. He said there's a Ministry of Magic, and he tells them about the Ministry of Magic and what they do, and more about Gringotts, and that a Gringotts supposedly has a dragon that guards the vaults and stuff. So he was learning a lot more about the Wizarding World. So we then get to see Harry's list of school supplies, which I think is interesting to read, just to see what a first-year student needs for their first year. What a student needs for their first year at Hogwarts. So let me get to that page. I think it's interesting. Uniform. First-year students will require 1. 3 sets of plain work robes in black. 2. 1 plain pointed hat, black for day wear. 3. 1 pair of protective gloves, dragon hide or similar. 4. 1 winter cloak, black with silver fastenings. Please note that all pupils' clothes should carry a name tag. Course books. All students should have a copy of each of the following: The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1 by Miranda Goshawk. Tell me if I'm saying that wrong. A History of Magic by Bathilda Bagshot. Magical Theory by Adalbert Waffling. A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration by Emmerich Switch. 1000 Magical Herbs and Fungi by Philida Spore. Magical Drafts and Potions by Arsenius Jigger. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them by Newt Scamander. The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection by Quentin Trimble. And the other equipment they need is 1 wand, 1 cauldron, pewter standard size 2, 1 set of glass or crystal vials, 1 telescope, 1 set of brass scales, and students may also bring an owl or a cat or a toad. Parents are reminded that first years are not allowed their own broomsticks. When they arrive in London, they go to the Leaky Cauldron. Harry's really curious. It's like, Hagrid, can we find all that I need on this list in London? He says, only if you know the right place. So they go to Leaky Cauldron, which is a pub, a bar. It's between a record shop and a bookstore in London. And Harry's noticing that Muggles seem to not pay it any attention, and he has this strange feeling that only he and Hagrid can see it. Suddenly, everyone recognized Harry Potter and comes up to talk to him and shake his hand. There's Doris Crockford, who keeps coming back for seconds, and Daedalus Diggle, who we saw mentioned in the first chapter, as being responsible for some of the shooting stars Muggles were seeing on the night that Voldemort disappeared. And actually, Harry says, "I recognize you. You bowed to me in the store before." And Douglas Diggle's so excited. He goes, "He remembers me! He remembers me!" And one of the last few people to talk to him, or one of the younger people to talk to him, was Professor Quirrell. And they kind of string up conversation and talk about school. Quirrell has this stutter, which we know. Hey, editing Kathleen here. I was, well, obviously editing and watching this part, and realized that I failed to include a pretty important, I guess, sort of a detail about Professor Quirrell. When Harry is introduced to him, afterwards, Hagrid kind of explains that he took a year or so off, like a sabbatical from teaching to go to the Dark Forest to study vampires, and that he must have had a bad interaction with them because of that, of how nervous he is. So there's this period of time where he's not at Hogwarts and supposedly studying vampires. So I just wanted to put that in here real quick. Just seemed like an important detail. I don't know why I didn't put it in my notes or remember to mention it. But yeah, that was something I wanted to mention. Alright, back to the normal video where I have makeup on and don't look like a potato. And yeah, that's basically our introduction to one of the first professors. Well, that's Harry's first introduction to a professor from Hogwarts. So Hagrid led him out of the Leaky Cauldron after Doris Crockford got her last handshake in, into a small walled courtyard. He was examining the bricks and trying to remember which ones he needed to tap, and he tapped the brick wall 3 times strategically, and the wall pulled away to reveal Diagon Alley. That's probably one of the most visually pleasing parts, scenes in the movie, which is just him tapping it and the bricks suddenly just, you know, cascading away. That was really interesting to me. And did anybody else remember on the first Harry Potter DVD, Harry Potter and Sorcerer's Stone, they had these really cool DVD games and you had to remember what the pattern was? Let me know if you remember that down below. And maybe, I wonder if it's possible to get that DVD working and being able to film that, doing a gameplay of that. Anyway, my own thoughts going on. Diagon Alley is a twisted cobbled street lined on both sides with shops selling cauldrons, owls, brooms, robes, and so much more. I love how we're seeing this through Harry's perspective, and Harry said he wished that he had like several different pairs of eyes because he was just twisting his head around to see everything. Was just so amazed by what he's seeing. And I felt the same exact way when I went to Diagon Alley for the first time at Universal Studios Florida, obviously Florida, and seeing Diagon Alley for the first time. I'll throw a cool picture up of me and my boyfriend in Diagon Alley. Oh god, it was so cool. So that I was literally transported back there when I was reading this. Their first stop, of course, is Gringotts. And when they get to Gringotts, I'm going to read the inscription that's on the door because I think it's pretty interesting. Because we don't really see it in the movie. I mean, it's a detail that is not exactly that important early on, but it's kind of important to know that it's impossible to break into Gringotts or steal anything. Yes, now they're facing a second pair of doors, silver this time, with words engraved upon them. Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed. For those who take but do not earn must pay most dearly in their turn. So if you seek beneath our floors a treasure that was never yours, thief, you have been warned to beware of finding more than treasure there. So inside Gringotts is a marble hall with hundreds of goblins sitting at long counters on stools, weighing coins and examining stones. So Hagrid goes up to a free goblin and states that they are there to get money out of Harry's vault. After digging around his pockets and disgusting the goblin, honestly, by putting stuff on his counter, he finally finds Harry's key and presents it to him. And after showing it and getting everything in order for Harry to get into his vault, Hagrid also gives him the letter from a letter from Dumbledore about the important secret errand. What is it with Dumbledore and just sending letters for important tasks? Anyway, they are then taken to the vaults by Griphook. I think it's interesting because none of the other goblins are named in this chapter except for Griphook, so I feel like that's important. Well, I know it is important, but for those of you maybe on their first read, it's important that you know his name is Griphook. So typically, if they don't name anybody else but a specific person or creature, that's why, because you'll need to remember that name for another time. With Griphook, Hagrid, and Harry, they all get into a cart once they go to get to the vaults, and it is this catacombs of several vaults beneath the city of London and the London Underground, according to Hagrid. So it's like, I've never been on the ride at Universal. Side note, Universal rides most of the Harry Potter rides are not very friendly if you have a little extra cushion. So just be aware of that. So next time I go, I'm definitely going to be losing a little bit of weight before I go so I can actually get on the ride and enjoy it. But basically, they basically are almost on a roller coaster with so many twists and turns, and Hagrid's kind of getting sick. They stop at Harry's vault first. Harry is shocked by the piles and piles of galleons, sickles, and nuts that await him when they walk into his vault. They get him enough for a couple of terms and leave the rest. I think it was interesting to note that Harry was like, clearly the Dursleys knew nothing about this, because if they did, they would have had it faster than, they would have had it as fast as Harry would have never seen it, ever. Next, they go to the mysterious and heavily secured vault, number 713. All that is in there is a little package wrapped in brown paper. And Hagrid's like, don't ask me about this. It is a very secret Hogwarts business. So with lots of money in tow, the first place Harry goes is to get his robes at Madame Malkin's, while Hagrid goes to grab a pick-me-up at a Leaky Cauldron because he's looking green at this point from all the twists and turns on this crazy cart ride they went in Gringotts. So inside Madame Malkin's, as he's getting measured for robes, he meets a pale boy his age, also going to Hogwarts. The boy tells him about Quidditch, Slytherin, Hufflepuff, and how he looks down Wizards and Muggle families. So that's how I wrote down the note. So basically, he's saying, "Oh, well, have you ever played Quidditch, or what kind of Quidditch?" And Harry's like, doesn't really know what Quidditch is. And then he starts talking about, "I'll probably be. Do you know what house you'll be sorted in?" Harry's not really sure because he's trying not to. He's trying not to seem like he knows nothing because he's kind of insecure about being so new to this world. And he's like, and this pale boy's like, "Well, of course I'm going to be in Slytherin. Can you imagine being put in Hufflepuff? How I might as well die of embarrassment and go home." And then he talks about when he's like saying, "So what's your where are your parents?" He goes, "Oh, my parents are dead." And he goes, "Well, they were wizards, right?" And he says, "Yeah." And he says, "People that come from Muggle families shouldn't even go to Hogwarts. My family and I think that it should be kept with the sacred families, yada yada, blah blah blah." You know, this kind of snootiness. Harry actually is thinking that he is reminded of Dudley with this boy. So luckily he was done with his robe fittings, and Hagrid got ice cream for Harry and him, which they ate together after the robe fittings, like I said. And Harry was really quiet, and after buying parchment, quills, and ink, Harry tells Hagrid about the boy at the rope shot, and Hagrid explains Quidditch a little better because Harry's like, "What's Quidditch?" He talks about the Hogwarts houses and saying that there wasn't, basically this is when we learned that better Hufflepuff than Slytherin, because how he said there's no witch or wizard that didn't go bad that wasn't from Slytherin, and said that Voldemort was a Slytherin. And he also told him why it's okay to be a Muggle-born witch or wizard, but he assured Harry, "You're not from a Muggle family, but your mother was," and he was saying that some of the best witches and wizards he's met were Muggle-born. So he's just Harry's just learning a little bit more about the wizarding world. They then bought Harry's books at Flourish and Blots, and he was actually looking at a book to learn how to curse Dudley, and Hagrid has to be like, "You can't really do magic outside of Hogwarts or in the presence of a Muggle because blah blah blah," because obviously they gotta keep it secret from the Muggles. Then he bought a cauldron, scales, and a collapsible brass telescope. He actually wanted to buy a solid gold cauldron, which Hagrid talked him out of, saying the list clearly says that you need a standard size 2 pewter cauldron. But they did get a nice pair of scales to weigh his potion ingredients. Then they went to the apothecary and picked up a basic supply of potion ingredients. Before going to get Harry's wand, Hagrid buys Harry a snowy owl for his birthday from Ilo's Owl Emporium. And then here we are at Ollivander's. So at Ollivander's, Harry is greeted by Mr. Ollivander, who is the wand maker. And we know that Ollivander's is a family shop that's been in business since, I think it was 482, 428 BC. I'll put the number here if I'm wrong, because I'm not good at remembering numbers, but they've basically been making wands and doing this for a very long time. So Ollivander looks at Harry and he says, "I wonder when I would be seeing you, Mr. Potter." And he starts to reflect on his mom's wand and his dad's wand, because he's saying that I remember every wand I've ever made. He talks about Lily's wand, about James' wand. He says he gets closer to Harry and touches his scar, which I'm like, all right, little too touchy-feely there. Apparently doesn't understand boundaries or, you know, social, I guess, clearly they weren't social distancing. But he touches Harry's scar and says, "Unfortunately, I also made the wand who did that," with the phoenix feather inside, and talks about Voldemort's wand. And then he also says, "Oh, hi, Hagrid," and starts talking about his wand. "Fine wand you had, right? I suppose they snapped it in half when you got expelled." And Hagrid said, "Yep, but Dumbledore let me keep the pieces." And he's like, he's like, "Oh, but you haven't done anything with them, have you?" And Hagrid's like, "No." And he kind of inches his umbrella closer to him, which were basically, these are clues to pick up that his umbrella has his wand, the pieces of his wand inside. That's basically the hint that we're getting. Oh, I really want that new Noble Collection replica of Hagrid's wand umbrella. I want that so bad. So now comes the time for Harry to get to not pick his wand, because as Ollivander says, the wand chooses the wizard. He starts measuring him with a magical measuring tape. It measures his arms. It even started measuring his nostrils at one point. It was so funny. But after going through several wands, like, he would literally put a wand in Harry's hand, and Harry would just kind of wave it around, and before he could even do anything, he would take it, Ollivander would be like, "Nope," take it out of his hand, and they went through several of them. And he finally goes, "I wonder," or Ollivander finally picks one and goes, "I wonder." He gives it to Harry, and suddenly there's this warmth that comes over him, and red and gold sparks start shooting out of the wand. And that means the wand finally chose Harry. And what was curious about this, as Ollivander said, that this wand contains a phoenix feather, and the phoenix that gave the feather for that wand gave another feather, just one for another wand, which was the phoenix feather that lies in Voldemort's wand. So he was saying it's interesting that you'd be destined to have this wand when its brother gave you that scar. And he said that, "I guess this means we'll expect great things from you. While you know who did awful things, he did great but terrible things, but still great." So Harry's like, "I'm not really sure if I like this guy. It's not really the thing you say to somebody whose parents got killed by Voldemort, but you know." Clearly, he doesn't seem to understand social like norms. Talk about Ollivander. So Harry got his wand, and it got wrapped up, and he had all of his supplies, and it was time for them to leave Diagon Alley and go back to the train station so Harry could go back to the Dursleys. Because that's something the movie doesn't really get right either, is that we see him get his school supplies, and immediately, it seems like the next day, he gets on the Hogwarts Express to go to Hogwarts. But he goes back to the Dursleys for like another month. So as their day drew to an end, Hagrid buys them hamburgers at the train station before Harry has to go. This is when Harry confides in Hagrid about the pressure he is feeling from his fame. And he's like, "Hagrid, I don't even know anything about magic, and I don't remember anything about that night that his parents died." And Hagrid reassures Harry and says, everyone starts at the beginning of Hogwarts, and you're gonna enjoy your time at Hogwarts. He says, I sure did, and I still do, you know, because he's the groundskeeper at Hogwarts. Then Hagrid makes sure Harry makes it onto the train and sends him back to the Dursleys. And that is where chapter 5 ends. So my one discussion question I have is, what would be the first thing you buy in Diagon Alley? I'm gonna go ahead and apologize if the camera angle changes. I can never replicate it completely on my phone, but we finally made it to chapter 6. The journey from platform 9 3/4. So this has been a pretty long video so far, but I hope that you're enjoying my pretty in-depth discussions about the chapters. I think that it's really fun. It's something I haven't really, maybe I haven't personally seen on YouTube, but something that I've always wanted to contribute with my Harry Potter content creating. Alright, that's, let's get actually to the chapter. So chapter 6 is all about both ours and Harry's journey from platform 9 3/4 to Hogwarts. Obviously, the chapter is called The Journey from Platform 9 3/4. So we begin with Harry's last month with the Dursleys. Dudley is terrified of Harry and won't even stay in the same room as him. Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon don't really make him stay in a cupboard or anything. They kind of just pretend they're half scared, half furious, and they kind of just pretend Harry's not there and act like it doesn't exist, which I think is, well, which I know is, it's another form of mental abuse, and they realize that they lost control and weren't able to keep Harry from fulfilling, you know, living out the way he's supposed to live as a wizard. So now they're trying to further mentally scar him. That's my take on that. It's really heartbreaking in general, just thinking about it. Reading as an adult is more heartbreaking, I think, than as a kid, when I read as a kid. In his last month with the Dursleys, Harry names his owl Hedwig, which is a name he found from A History of Magic. He's read through some of his books and he thinks they're really interesting. And he actually has a piece of paper in which he is ticking off the days until he goes to King's Cross to go to Hogwarts. But on the last day of August, he gets up the courage to finally, he's like, he should at least talk to Uncle Vernon and tell him that he needs a ride to King's Cross so he can ride the train to get to Hogwarts. And then Uncle Vernon's like, bit of a normal way to get there. Where's the school anyway? Harry doesn't know. He reads his ticket and says, all I know is I need to go to King's Cross, platform 9 3/4 at 11 o'clock. And Vernon's like, platform what now? Don't talk rubbish. There's no such thing as that. And he's like, all right, I'll take you to platform 9 3/4. We gotta go to London tomorrow anyway. And Harry asks him, why do you need to go London? He goes, well, we gotta take Dudley to the hospital to get them to cut off that tail before he goes off to Smeltings. Which is kind of, my mind immediately goes like, how are they going to explain that to the hospital? And like, I'm wondering, like, is the ministry going to get involved at this point? Because usually they're supposed to keep, you know, this world secret from them. Like, they surely know that something went amiss in the Dursley family. They surely have to know it. I don't know. I'm interested. I'm just wondering how that's gonna go. So so at 5 a.m. on September 1st, Harry wakes up and starts packing his stuff, and about 2 hours later, or a few hours or so later, they start loading up the car, and Aunt Petunia convinces Dudley to sit next to Harry in the car, and they drop him off at King's Cross, and Vernon walks him inside and says, here you go, here's platforms 9 and 10, good luck. And he runs off and goes to the car, and Harry can hear them laughing, the Dursleys laughing as they drive away from King's Cross. And Harry is suddenly wondering where he cannot find platform 9 3/4. He's freaking out. Obviously the Dursleys must have thought this was hilarious, like, yep, good luck. So basically they're knowingly abandoning Harry since they don't know that platform 9 3/4 exists. You know, in case you didn't already think that the Dursleys were really crappy people, which, I mean, who wouldn't think that? So Harry couldn't find the platform, And suddenly, through the chaos and as time gets closer, he overhears a woman say, "Packed with muggles," as you remember from the movie. Turns around and sees a woman and she had 5 kids with her, and they were all redheaded, flaming red hair, as described in the book. And she talks to her youngest daughter. She goes, "And what's the platform number, Jenny?" And she says, why platform 9 3/4? So Harry's like, following behind them, he's like, okay, these people seem to know where they're going. And, you know, Jenny's like, "Can't I go too, Mom?" And she says, "No, Jenny, you get to go next year." And he's watching them as there's this divider, this barrier between platforms 9 and 10. And he watches them, and he sees the 2 older boys. He watches the older boys one by one disappear between 9 and 10, not really knowing where they went. Before the youngest son goes, he then speaks up and says, "Excuse me," and which we know her name's Molly. I'm gonna say Molly. She sees him. It's like, "Oh, it's first time at Hogwarts too. It's Ron's first time too." And Harry's like, "How do I get on a platform?" And she's like, "Oh, so you run completely to that brick wall between platforms 9 and 10. Between platforms 9 and 10, and you run at full speed. Don't get scared that you're gonna crash. Just keep going." And Harry's like, "Okay, this is a little weird." She says, "Okay, go before Ron," which is the youngest son, and he successfully makes it onto the platform. Like, he's really scared. He's like, "Okay, it's going really fast. I can't stop now." And he goes through and makes it through and sees a scarlet red engine, and behind him where the platform was, or where the barrier was, there's a sign that says platform 9 3/4. And he sees a Hogwarts Express, and there's crowds of people and their pets, cats, owls, toads. He passes Neville and his gran. Neville had lost his toad. He passes someone named Lee, which we know later is Lee Jordan, who's surrounded by other kids, and he has a box, and you're like, "Open it, Lee," and he opens it, and it says a hairy leg sticks out. So Harry continues on, and Harry finally finds an empty compartment and starts to try and load his stuff. As he is struggling to get his trunk in the compartment, he is helped by the twins, 2 of the brothers from the family that he saw before, the twins, which we know are Fred and George. They then realize he is Harry Potter, and they basically, I'm just gonna say, they start fanboying, like, "You're Harry Potter." They kind of stand there, you know, mouths, jaws drop, like. And then Molly asks where Fred and George are, because she wanted to say goodbye to them, as they go off for another year at Hogwarts. And Harry's a little relieved, and he sits down, and he realizes that he can see the Weasley family from the door, or from the window, and he can hear them as well. Fred and George are like, "Guess who we saw on the train?" And Molly says, "Who?" And they say, "Harry." And Jane's like, "Oh, Mom, can I please go see him?" And she goes, "Harry, this boy is not so into Goggle-Ack. It's like something in the zoo." And Fred's like, "I wonder if he remembers what you-know-who looks like." And she says she forbids all of her children from asking anything. So the children that are with her, just for a head count, there's Percy, who is the oldest of the children that are there. He's a prefect. There's Fred and George, the twins, and then there's Ron and Jenny with them. And she's actually probably one of my favorite parts, which is kind of it's not really an important detail, but it makes me laugh. One of my favorite parts of this chapter is she's getting on to Fred and George. She says, "If I get one more letter that you've blown up a toilet at the school," and Fred's like, "That's a great idea. We've never done that, Mom. Thanks for the idea." And when they're saying their goodbyes to Jenny and Molly, Jenny starts crying because she wants to go with them, and Fred's like, "Don't cry, we'll write loads of letters," or Fred, George, one of them, and then the other twin says, "Yeah, we'll send you a Hogwarts toilet seat," and Molly's like Molly gets onto him, he's like, "Only joking, Mom." It makes me laugh so hard. It's like it is my favorite part of this chapter that's in the book and not in the movie. I would have died if it was in the movie. So the train leaves, and the youngest Weasley brother Ron comes to the compartment because he's like, everywhere else is full. Can I sit here? And Harry lets him. And Fred and George come back and say, hey, Lee Jordan's got a tarantula toward the middle of the train. Just want to let you know. And then he said, oh, by the way, Harry, I don't know if we introduced ourselves. I'm Fred. This is my brother, George. And this is our youngest brother, Ron. And then Ron, after they leave, Ron looks at him and goes, are you really Harry Potter? And Harry said, yes. He's like, so you really got that scar? And he lifts it, and Ron's like, that's really cool. And he's like, he says, so you know who actually gave you a scar? He's like, yeah, but I don't remember anything about it except a green light. And they kind of sit in silence. But what's just interesting is they're kind of getting to know each other because Harry finds Ron just as much as Ron finds Harry interesting, because Harry's really never spent much time with wizards and stuff. So this is really exciting for him. So he starts asking questions about his family, and we find out the Weasleys have a fun hobby of having lots of kids. So he has his older brother, Bill. There's Charlie. Bill works for Gringotts, and Charlie is studying dragons in Romania. And then they get on to, and then Harry had accidentally said Voldemort instead of you know who, and Ron was like, you said that? And Harry's like, no, I'm not saying it because I'm brave. I'm saying it because I really don't know anything about Wizarding World. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to say it. See, I have a lot to learn. And he confides in Ron about his insecurities. So he confides in Ron about his insecurities. The trolley witch comes by, and Ron kind of turns a little pink because he doesn't really have any money for it, and Harry buys a lot because he suddenly has a lot of money. But Harry and Ron kind of bond over the fact that Ron, having so many older brothers, always got the hand-me-downs, and Ron told him I didn't have any money too, living with the Dursleys, and I always had to wear hand-me-downs from my cousin Dudley. So they kind of bonded that way, which I think is really interesting. I really wish we had seen more. We see some of the bonding in the movie, but I really wish that we could see more of that in the book, from the books into the movies. I really wish we could have seen more of this friendship they like have. Like, it's very like a genuine like bond they're building right here. So Harry gets there's a scene where they go through the chocolate frogs and go through the cards. He gets Albus Dumbledore and reads the back of the card. Then they eat 3 box every flavor beans. And then suddenly Neville comes in looking for his toad. And they say, sorry, we haven't seen him. And then Hermione comes back with Neville to look for the toad. And Ron was just about to do the spell on Scabbers, you know, sunshine, daisies, bottom mellow, turn to stupid fat rat yellow, which doesn't work. And Hermione kind of inserts herself into the conversation, says, and starts bragging about how she's already read every book and memorized every book for the school year, saying that she was so excited when she got the letter, and we learned that she's a witch born from a family of muggles. And then she starts, when they introduce each other, she fangirls over Harry and says that she's read about his name in 3 different books. And then she starts talking about Hogwarts houses, saying she thinks Gryffindor must be the best house, but she would also wouldn't mind Ravenclaw as well. So now that we're up to this part, we know that there's 4 houses: Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Once she finally leaves, much to the relief of Harry and Ron, because they're a little overwhelmed with this powerful girl who seems to know everything, and they felt a little like, were we supposed to memorize everything? So she finally leaves, and Ron talks a little bit more about his family legacy, saying that everybody in his family has been sorted into Gryffindor, and he's like, I can't imagine the embarrassment it would be if I'd gotten sorted into anything other than Gryffindor. Like, I'm definitely not going to be Ravenclaw. And he says, what if I get sorted into Slytherin, and every bad witch and wizard's ever come from Slytherin, kind of furthering, like, or kind of confirming, to at least in Harry's mind, confirming what Hagrid had said in Diagon Alley. And was saying, and Harry kind of chimed in, like, oh yeah, that was the house you know who was in. And he starts talking. This is when he talked about what his brothers do. because Harry didn't know what witches and wizards did after Hogwarts. So again, I kind of got a little ahead of myself earlier. Charlie's studying dragons in Romania, and Bill is working for Gringotts somewhere in, what was it, Egypt, Africa? Something like that. I'll probably put it up here if I, in editing. And once we got to and on the subject of Gringotts, Ron's like, my dad was reading Daily Prophet this morning. There was a break-in at Gringotts, and Harry's not really thinking much of it because he's thinking about Hogwarts, but that was kind of important to talk about. There was a break-in at Gringotts and nothing was stolen. But they think it was a lot of people thought it was something to do with you-know-who. And after that conversation, they pick up the conversation to Quidditch, and Ron's like, what's your Quidditch team? Forgetting that Harry grew up with muggles and doesn't know what it is. So he starts telling Harry all about Quidditch, about the different positions and the different teams and the balls and everything, and they have this great conversation, getting him excited about it. And suddenly the door opens to the compartment again, but this time it is the pale boy from Madame Malkin's that Harry had met in Diagon Alley with two other boys, and they introduced themselves as Draco, Crabbe, and Goyle. Draco Malfoy, to be specific. And he was saying, so it's true, Harry Potter is going to Hogwarts. And when he introduces himself as Draco Malfoy, Ron kind of sniggers a little bit, thinking his name's funny. He's like, and of course, you know, kind of like in the movie, except it's on the train, not on in the Hogwarts. He goes, think my name's funny, do you? I don't need to know your name. My father's told me all about the Weasleys, who, the way he puts it, they have more children than they can afford. And basically they kind of, Ron kind of gets really offended by that, and let me get my thoughts together. And then Draco delivers the line to Harry that we've heard in the movie, saying, you know, I think you'll find in the wizarding world that there's some wizarding families that are much better than others, that are higher caliber than others, so if you need any help. And Harry tells him, you know, I think I can see which ones are better on my own, and Draco seems insulted that Harry didn't want to accept his friendship. Yeah, it was, you know, sorry, spacing out a little bit. This is a long video. So, obviously, Harry tells them to get out because they were being rude to Ron and him. And Draco's like, well, what if Crabbe and Goyle and I don't want to leave? And Ron they try and make him leave, so they kind of scuffle, they're about to scuffle a little bit, and Goyle tries to steal one of Chocolate Frog's, and suddenly Scabbers bites his finger, and they all freak out and run away, but Goyle like swings Scabbers off his finger, and Scabbers hits the window. Scabbers is fine. He falls back asleep because Scabbers must be, it's like was Percy's rat at one point, because we know that Ron has all these hand-me-downs from his brothers. He has Bill's robes and Bill's books and robes, Charlie's wand and Charlie's first wand, and Percy's rat. So we know that. So apparently Scabbers is just, you know, one of those pets that never dies, and it just seems indestructible. So after this happens, Hermione comes back in and seeing all the ruckus. Harry explains to, I guess, both of them, because, you know, Hermione's kind of snoopy, is kind of nosy at this point. Harry explains meeting Draco and Diagon Alley, and Ron kind of talks about the Malfoy family and how Draco's parents were followers of Voldemort, and when they came back after Voldemort disappeared, they were the first to come back and said that they claimed they were in a trance, but how Ron's dad doesn't believe that. And then Hermione tells them to change into the robes because they're about to arrive at Hogwarts and they need to be in the robes before they go for the sorting ceremony. And they finally arrive at Hogwarts, and first years line up with Hagrid, and how the first years get to Hogwarts is they take boats to the castle across the Great Lake, the Black Lake, and it is, again, like I've mentioned, like visually pleasing scenes from the first movie. This is probably my top visually pleasing scene for the movie. Like, it's just a beautiful scene, just the boats going to Hogwarts, and they're panning it up, and there's all these, you pan up to the castle, and there's these beautiful lights reflecting off the water. Like, it's so beautiful. And this is their first look at Hogwarts. Neville and Hermione get in the same boat as Ron and Harry. And the chapter ends as Hagrid knocks on the castle door 3 times. So that is a very detailed, but felt kind of rushed, a little bit of summary of the plot points of chapter 6, the journey from platform 9 3/4. And my discussion question for this chapter is, who would you like to sit with on the Hogwarts Express? So that is it. Thank you so much for watching my brand new video. And if you have made it to this point and stuck it out to the end, thank you so much for being here, for hanging out with me today. Let me know down below not only your answer to the discussion questions, which I'll also list in the description box as a helpful thing, so you don't have to skip through the video or anything to keep finding them. I'll put them in the description box. But also let me know your thoughts on these 3 chapters, any details I may have missed that you liked. Just let me know what your thoughts are down below. I would love to hear your thoughts. So it's just not me, rambling to a camera about the books. When I say rambling, I have my notes and I try to keep it to my notes. But this was a pretty long video because there's a lot of details in each chapter. So I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know down below if there's anything you'd like to see different, help me do different with this book club, a different structure. Any constructive suggestions would be very appreciated. I love y'all so much. Thank you for hanging out with me and bringing Lumos to my life. And let's continue to live Lumos every day. Bye.